Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode of Monday Morning Coffee with Christine. Read, watch, listen. Here again at the beautiful Pop 54 Art Gallery with Gary Cogill.
Ta-da! Ta-da, ta-da, ta-da.
Thank
Good to see
you
you.
so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
It's a privilege.
And you're going to give us your picks for a read, a watch, and a listen?
So I brought this book because it's a visual aid that means a lot to me. This is
Love it.
Howell Raines. Howell Raines was an editor for the New York Times for 2 years, left in bad company because there was a big scandal with the New York Times. But he wrote this book called Fly Fishing Through the Midlife Crisis. And I don't want you to read into this.
The title.
Fly Fishing Through the Midlife Crisis.
Amazing. Love that title.
And so this book is so weathered, it looks like it's been dipped in a swimming pool, but it's been around every fly fishing stream that I've ever fly fished on. And I would take it and I would read it at night and finally got through it. In fact, look, there's a picture of me catching and I didn't know that was in here until I picked the book up this morning.
I love that. I'm so glad we could bring that back
That's
to
a
you.
trout in central Oregon on a lake up near the Deschutes area. But this book means a lot because Hal not only was a brilliant writer, he was a Pulitzer Prize winner, but he writes about the importance of what it is for a man as he was going through a divorce, as he was having trouble with his two sons, as he was having trouble with his father. He felt like, and he says in the book so profoundly, and I'll paraphrase it, but he felt like men often have a hole in their heart. And there's something about fly fishing that fills that hole or fills them up. And I don't know what it is. You stand on a stream because fly fishing is a solitary activity. You don't do it as a group. It's not like bowling or football or basketball, but you go with a group, but you move down the stream and you get your own water. And when you stand in that stream, it's like a river runs through it. All things merge into one, a river runs through it, and I'm haunted by waters. And it's true because you do it by yourself. There's something about that cast and something about the rise of a fish and a fly and the simplicity of it. And there is something filling about it. It is true for me. So I found the book profound because it goes on and on about the intricacies of fly fishing, but it also talks about relationships.
Yeah. And fly fishing in general is, from hearing you talk about it, it's just as spiritual as it is a sport.
I think you're connected to the nature. You know, when you stand, like it says in A River Runs Through It, when you stand in the half light of a canyon, you know, with that count of throwing and throwing that fly and presenting that fly correctly on the water, there's something about the anticipation of it. And people say it doesn't matter if you catch anything or not. No, it matters.
Okay.
It matters. It helps a lot.
Okay.
And of course, most fly fishermen love to release that trout, release that fish.
I loved when you were telling me about that earlier. The way that you were showing me the gentleness of just holding it and making sure that it went off on its own.
I learned that with a lot of guides. Fly fishing is fun when you get a guide and you can afford it.
Sure.
That's always your best day of fishing. The worst day, the comedy of errors, is when you don't have a guide and you're hung up in a tree and your glasses fall off and go down the stream, and it's a nightmare sometimes. But when you get a guide, I learned a lot because they would really nurture those fish, and then you put it back in the water and you kind of get its lungs full of water again, and then you just kind of let it go off.
It's going to be okay. I just saw that recently in the movie Unbranded.
Yes.
Which is some Texas boys shot it about taking some Mustangs up north, but they had a little scene in there fly fishing, and it was really interesting. He was having so much fun, and it was so much about he was by himself, hadn't thought about that, and it was about the catching of it. But then, the same thing, watching him let it go. It was just as important to him that it went off safely as it was that he had caught it.
That's exactly true, because part of the process is not just catching it and the thrill of that, because it's so pure about a simple line and a simple fly. And you don't have big giant hooks that are grabbing. You know, some of the hooks are barbless too. That's really hard to catch something. But when you present that fish back into the environment that it came from, I hope somebody always treats me that nice.
Oh,
you know?
You mean when next time you get hooked?
Yes. Yeah, I'm already hooked.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's you were saying that it's a lot about the fishing part of it. That you are a fly fishing person, but you actually learned a lot about fly fishing. But then it's also the part about the relationships.
I think
and
it's
the
like
healing part of it.
sports books and movies and themes in general. When I watch The Natural, that's not really about
Field of
baseball.
Dreams.
When I watch Field of Dreams, it's really about relationships. when I read Howell Raines' book, Fly Fishing Through the Midlife Crisis, it's really about relationships.
Neat. Love
So
it.
the sub-theme is really fly fishing. The main theme is life.
Isn't that interesting that the sub-theme is the title, but I get it.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that's true about, subtlety is kind of everything in a lot of things. And when it says fly fishing on the title, you gravitate towards that and you get into it. It's deeper, richer, stronger, better, because it's about other things.
Love it. Thank you for introducing them and me to that book. I look forward to reading it.
Yeah.
I have purchased it.
Have you?
Have not bought it yet, yes, and
Yeah.
I did it responsibly through Amazon to make sure that the artist gets compensated, just like everyone should.
You can borrow my over waterlogged
No,
copy.
no,
I don't
no.
care.
We're keeping that. Wait, and you can use this picture as a bookmark. No, just kidding. Well, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
you are here after having been a film critic for over 20 years.
Right.
And I'm asking you what movie you recommend, and this is what you bring me.
Yeah.
What's
To
the
Kill a
movie?
Mockingbird. In 1962, I was 10 years old. And 1962 is considered by many film historians maybe the second best year of movies. 1939, Gone with the Wind, Wizard of Oz, Great Expectations, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
But you weren't alive then, so you missed that.
But I missed that era. So 62 was To Kill a Mockingbird and Lawrence of Arabia. And I grew up on both those films and watched them over and over and over. And I think I became a film critic because I sat through Lawrence of Arabia by myself 4 nights in a row as a 10-year-old.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy because it tells you a lot about bad parenting.
No.
That my parents
Oh, no.
would let me go.
I would argue that point. I think that was fabulous that they let you do that.
And it was safer then. But also,
Right.
the other movie was To Kill a Mockingbird, and I wanted to sit on that porch with Atticus. The name Atticus has
Right.
always resonated with me. I'm like, oh man, I want Atticus to be my dad. I want to sit on that porch.
Yes.
Dill comes and visits for the summer, who we find out is really Truman Capote. Harper Lee writes the novel, never writes another novel until recently.
Until this
we never
year.
thought we'd ever see another novel from her. And written, the screenplay, written by Horton Foote from Wharton, Texas. Horton from Wharton.
Right, love it.
And Horton went on to write Tender Mercies and Trip to Bountiful. He's one of the great Texas writers of all time, and it changed his life. It was Robert Duvall's very first film. He's Boo Radley. He's the mysterious man in the house that looks haunted, and the trial, and it's a novel about segregation and about the trial of a black man who's innocent, and Atticus is defending him. And I didn't quite understand that at 10. And it's a rape trial, and I didn't understand that at 10.
Right.
But it made me very uncomfortable watching it.
Right.
And I knew that man was innocent because I'd seen that movie 4 times
Right,
or
right,
5 times.
Right.
And I couldn't understand why the black population had to sit in the balcony. Why can't they sit downstairs with everyone else? This doesn't make any sense to me.
Layers and layers and layers to the movie.
And the movie's long. And it's also one of the few
Yes.
movies, because when you talk about movies and books, they're usually 2 different things.
Yeah.
And rarely do movies live up to books.
Almost never.
But that's the one that's one of the most accurate and I think lives up to the novel.
I agree.
Yeah, it's Richard, I think Mulligan directed it, but it's also an Elmer Bernstein music score. One of the first albums I ever bought
Oh,
was a music score to Kill a Mockingbird, and I would play it at home as a young boy.
wow.
As that needle dropped on there and you'd listen to all that great music from that music score by Elmer Bernstein. It took me to another world, and I wanted to hang out with Atticus.
Oh,
Atticus is the man. He's the man. Yeah.
Really
The greatest lawyer
incredible.
probably in the history of movies. And you can make a case that performance by Gregory Peck won the Oscar in 1962. Lawrence of Arabia won Best Picture.
Right.
So I was a happy 10-year-old. I got both films in there.
Right.
But boy, he was something else. It's considered one of the, you can make a case that's the great male performance in the history of movies.
You said that.
I think you make that case. I can make that case.
And I also loved what you said about that being such a great year for movies, to the point that it made Gary Cogill become a film critic. But you also said that that year affected Steven Spielberg in an amazing way.
I've had many discussions with Spielberg about this, and I don't mean to name drop, but part of this conversation started when I told him my love for Lawrence of Arabia and why I became a film critic. And he looks at me and gets very teary-eyed and says, I became a filmmaker because of Lawrence of Arabia. And then he goes off in his monologue about his life. And that's profound to me. He's a few
Right.
years older than I am, but it's you see things that are monumental. And at 10, I think I had an art experience at 10. And rather than stepping on my foot and the lid opens and I treated a movie like a piece of garbage or fast food, I treated it with reverence and
Definitely.
respect, and I started to do that at a young age. And so becoming a film critic and recognize truth in the most unlikely place, and there it is in a movie, and it jumps off the screen and is profound to me. I still do not understand all of the ambiguities of Lawrence of Arabia or To Kill a Mockingbird, but I resonated with him. And I resonated him on a deeper level than most kids at the age of 10. So I started seeing every movie after that made.
Love that. And my friend Chad Draper was talking about Huckleberry Finn, the book, and how it's from the perspective of a 12-year-old.
Right.
And most of us are made to read that book when we're younger and can't get it at all.
No.
He loves the book so much that he still reads it once a year, makes himself
No
read once a
kidding.
year. No,
I need to do that
well,
because
that's
that book always troubled
That's
me.
what made me think of it. Not just for Huckleberry Finn that we need to revisit some of the classics because we probably missed stuff, but how many people need to go see To Kill a Mockingbird again, right?
And you can rent it. It's 3 hours and 5 minutes long, and you'll listen to that music score, and it'll jump off that television set for you.
Right.
Yeah, and you block out the time. Movies back then took a little bit more effort. You know, Lawrence of Arabia is 4 hours long. To Kill a Mockingbird's 3:05. And that's an investment of time. And now we're so ADD that we want everything just to like fly and boom and blow up.
Yep.
Because that's the way movies are right now. That when you get something thoughtful and epic and beautiful and so difficult to make, so difficult to take a great book and make it into a great movie.
And they did a fine job. Thank you for reminding us about that
I think it's one of the best
I
movies
go see
ever
it again.
made. To Kill a Mockingbird, the
Awesome.
great Gregory Peck.
Awesome. And then we're going to move to your piece of obscure music that you chose.
So I'm a Randy Newman fanatic.
The only Randy Newman fanatic.
And
Just kidding.
there are many of us around the world.
I
And you
know.
can make a case that Bob Dylan's a great songwriter, Paul Simon's a great songwriter. They're great. But I think you can make a case for James Taylor's one. You can make a case that Randy Newman's in there for prolific songwriting. But Randy Newman also writes music scores. He did the soundtrack to The Natural, that great big orchestra score when Redford hits the home run or strikes out the whammer, and that big score is Randy Newman because his relatives, Thomas Newman and Alfred Newman, all wrote scores too, so he grew up around that. But then he also wrote funny songs like Short People.
Right.
But his real iron in the fire, his resonance with the rest of us, is really these little melancholy love songs that he wrote, including I Think It's Going to Rain Today, Broken Windows, Empty Hallways,
Surprised me.
Pale Red Moon on a Sky Streaked with
Love that
Spring.
song.
Human kindness is overflowing, and I think it's going to rain today. Oh my God, that's Randy Newman.
Yeah.
He also wrote You Can Leave Your Hat On.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't know that either.
And then he wrote this song. It's
This
called
song.
Emotional Girl, and it's obscure.
Never heard of it.
I've never known anybody who knew the lyrics or could even sing it. But
Yeah,
Randy
you know every word.
Randy Newman can't sing very well, kind of like Dylan.
Right.
But he wrote this song, and he wrote it a long time ago. And I remember years back in the day when VHS tapes first came out, and I was discovering Randy Newman. And also, as a film critic, I was going to the Oscars every year, and I would see him there, and we'd talk on the red carpet about it, because he was nominated every year. Won the Oscar for Toy Story music.
He's won Grammys.
Yes, multi Grammys.
Emmys, yeah.
Yeah, and
No,
Emmys. But he
Tonys,
he wrote this song called "Emotional Girl," and I first heard it's called Randy Newman Live at the Odeon, which is a little tiny club in New York City, in Manhattan. And you can see cars going by, and Linda Ronstadt gets out of the audience and sings 2 songs that he wrote, and she looks like she's 19. So it's years ago. It's in the 80s, and it's Emotional Girl, and that song just, so I did some research and found him. He sings it on one of his records, and that's it. She's a real emotional girl, wears her heart on her sleeve, and every little thing you tell her, she'll believe. She even cries in her sleep. I've heard her many times before. I've never had a girl who loved me half as much as this girl loves me. She's a real emotional girl. For 18 years she lived alone. She was Daddy's little girl. Now Daddy's helped her move out on her own. She met a boy. He broke her heart. And now she lives alone. And she's very, very careful. Yes, she is. She's a real emotional girl. Lives down deep inside herself. She turns on easy. It's like a hurricane. You would not believe it. You better hold on tight to her. She's real emotional. It's a stunning song. that I can't sing, but the lyrics.
From Randy Newman. Short
Randy
people,
Newman.
Randy Newman.
Who wrote You Can Leave Your Hat On, but he also wrote all these great little, and when you start to get into the catalog of Randy Newman, you find things like Emotional Girl.
You make me want to get into the
Yeah.
catalog of Randy Newman.
Yeah, you have to get over his voice.
In a way I never had. No. Thank you.
He's awesome. And if you ever get a chance to see him live, because he tours a lot, just him and a piano doing that stuff.
That would be amazing. You'll let me
Yeah.
know if you ever
I
hear
will.
about it, right?
I will.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That was beautiful. And thank you all for sharing that moment with us. And I will see you next week.